All right, so now I'm going to walk you through how to answer these questions. By this point, you should have either listened to me read through this or read through it on your own. And now we get to this part. It tells us what their scientific question is. The question they were trying to answer with this experiment was, how does temperature affect the flowering time of Dame's rocket? Next, it's asking, what is the hypothesis? Now here, it asks you to go back into the reading and underline the hypothesis. I don't want you to do that. What I want you to do is write down the hypothesis right here below this question. Now remember, it's important that we word our hypothesis correctly. A hypothesis is an if-then statement. If I do this, then this will happen. So in this case, they were looking at how does temperature affect the flowering time of Dame's rocket. And they thought that an increase in temperature would make the flowers appear sooner. So their hypothesis would probably be something like, if I raise the temperature, then the flowers will bloom sooner. Right? If I do this, then this will happen. If I raise the temperature, then the flowers will appear sooner. That's our hypothesis. That's what you can write down right here. Okay. Then we have our data, right? We don't know whether our hypothesis is true or not. We have to look at our data to find that out. So we see here that in the normal plot that was not heated, 28 of the plants survived long enough to flower, and it took those plants about 16 days to produce their first flower. However, in the heated plot that was heated to 3 degrees Celsius more, 25 of those plants survived long enough to flower. And those plants that did survive, it only took them 6 days until the first flower appeared. So that is a big difference. We see that in the heated plots, not as many survived, but they did flower much sooner. So our hypothesis was actually correct in this case. Now, we need to identify the variables. We need to identify the independent variable and the dependent variable here. If you don't remember which is which, it's always easiest to go back to the hypothesis. The independent variable is the if portion of our hypothesis, and the dependent variable, we can find that in the then portion of our hypothesis. So what was our hypothesis? Well, you should have it written down up here. It was, if I heat the plots, then the flowers will bloom faster, or however you worded that. If I add heat, then the flowers will appear sooner. All right, so if I add heat, so our independent variable is going to be heat, whether they're heated or not. So the temperature, right, is going to be our independent variable. Our dependent variable is the second portion of our hypothesis. Then the flowers will bloom sooner, right? So what variable can we find in there? That's the flowers, right? We're looking for the flowers as our dependent variable. So the thing that we can control, our independent variable, is the heat. We can decide the temperature, whether we heat the plots or not. The dependent variable, the result, is the flower time. We're hoping that the temperature affects the flowering time. Then we get here to our graph. And we have to make a graph based on the data that it gave us. We're going to make a bar graph here. And it says on our y-axis, the average number of days until first flower. And we're going to do this for the normal plot right here and for the heated plot over here. So for the normal plot, we need to go back to our data and find out how many days until first flower. So here's our normal plot. This is the number of plants that survived. So that's not what we want. We want the average number of days until first flower. So that was 16.11 for the normal plot. So we're going to come back over here, find 16.11, which is going to be right above the 16 line, and we're going to color in everything below that because we're going to make a bar graph here. Okay, so you would color everything in below this. Then we need to do the same thing for the heated. Let's go back to our data set. Here we have heated, and it was about 6 days until first flower for the heated plot. So we come over here, we find number 6, see where that would line up. We're going to color in everything under 6. Okay, so we have our bar graph showing our data. Now, this is stuff that you guys are going to work through on your own here. You're going to interpret the data. Make a claim that answers a scientific question, which again was right up here. How does temperature affect the flowering time of Dame's rocket? Does it affect it? Does it make it flower sooner? Does it make it flower later? So make your claim. In this case, I think the data shows that temperature does make it flower faster. So that's what you would put here. But you can't just leave it at that. See, next it says, what evidence was used to write your claim? Reference specific parts of the table or the graph. So you need to go back and you need to explain. Well, it makes it flower faster because we can see that it only took 6 days for the heated plants to flower, but it took 16 days for the normal ones. So that shows a big difference, a big speed increase in the heated plants. All right, so you have to describe and be very specific with your descriptions with these next few questions. All right, and again, you're going to explain your reasoning and why the evidence supports your claim. Was the hypothesis correct or not? And the next steps. All right, so what new questions should be investigated to build on this research? You need to use full sentences for all of these. If you are not using full sentences, you are not going to get full credit. And you should use more than one sentence per question. Okay, you need to be very detailed and give me a full explanation for each of these. There should be at least a few sentences per question. All right, so sometimes you might have to think about it a little bit, think about exactly what you're going to say, but please fully answer the question in order to get full credit.